and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick with the City of Hampton, and today we are going to talk about the reassessments for this coming tax year, what it means to you. My guest is the City Assessor Brian Gordineer. Welcome back.
Good morning, Robin.
This is always really one of my favorite shows because I think it's so important for people to understand what's going on with our homes, which is kind of at least my principal investment, my biggest investment ever. And we've had a lot of not very good news in that regard. You know, nobody wants to see their nest egg getting smaller instead of getting bigger. So, Brian, let's just jump to what is the news for homeowners this year?
It's good news. Over the past 3 years, we have been rebounding from the recession, and this year we did see the rebound in the residential portion of the real estate market. In the previous years, the commercial and the multifamily had rebounded, but this year those areas are joined by the residential as well. Last year we were in a stabilization mode, and it was essentially the residential was essentially flat. But this year it had increased by 0.47%, so that's a good move.
That is good. Now, is this going to be, this does not apply to every home in the city. You guys look at sales in neighborhoods that are maybe not what I might think my neighborhood is, but like kinds of characteristics and like kinds of houses.
That's correct.
As always, some people will, in fact, the vast majority of homeowners will not get a letter from you this year. Their values have stayed the same, everything's status quo, they won't hear from you. They can still call you or look it up online,
okay,
but you're only going to send postcards. In fact, people should have them this week or should be getting them. To those whose properties changed in value.
That's right. Of the 51,000, almost 51,000 parcels in the city, 25% will get notices.
And again, this is a little confusing for people because I want to make clear, when you're giving these numbers, we're talking about all property owners. So that includes apartments, that includes commercial buildings, and residential.
That's right. And of those 25% of the property owners that are getting notices, a little more than half are seeing increases in their property values, and a little less than half will see decreases with the continuing stabilization of the market. And that's an improvement, though, because last year, 2/3 of our notices were decreases and only 1/3 were increases. In value.
And I want to see if we can get the guys in the back to put up some maps, because the maps really told the story for me. And I know online you're not going to be able to see the detail in the neighborhood, but when you look at the colors, so the map from a year ago showed a lot of, we use the color red. Red's always bad news, red ink. It showed quite a few neighborhoods decreasing by, a substantial noticeable amount. I think that's in the 4 or 5% range.
Right.
And they were scattered throughout the city. As you know, there's no particular trend. There's no identifying thing. But then when you look at this year's, there's only 2 neighborhoods that are red. And you see a lot more in the very small, like 1% decrease, and you see a lot of green. Right. And green means good. Green means those homes have increased in value. And I think that's good news as far as the investment that we all make in our homes. And I think it's good news for the city in terms of seeing that stabilization.
It is. In the last year, that map did have red, yellow, oranges, and even a couple purple. Purple were the biggest reductions.
I didn't notice that.
But this year, we had many, many, many less. And as you say, the ones that we did have were just in the 2%, 1% reduction range. So, and the other important element to remember is that we may not make a change for a year or 2 or even 3 because we don't have enough market evidence to feel confident, so that we may have made a reduction this year, but it may have been the accumulation of the last 3 years of activity, and we finally felt we had enough evidence to warrant the change.
Okay, so I know you understand and I understand, but tell the public what you mean by market evidence. So what causes you to move that value in a particular neighborhood?
We are looking at fair market value transactions, and those are transactions where there's a willing buyer and a willing seller. The person is not under duress to sell the property, nor is the person having to buy the property for some reason. We automatically take out of our analysis foreclosures, bank sales. We take out things like sales related to maybe a divorce, transactions between family members. Those are all eliminated, and we get true fair market value transactions. And this year we had 634 of those, and that's another good sign because last year we had 10% fewer. So we're seeing an increase in market activity as well as the appreciation in value.
Well, and I think a lot of the markets, this is not exclusive to Hampton, have really been affected by those foreclosures, lending practices. I mean, all the things that cause that housing bubble across the country to crash, much worse in some places than in Hampton. As that starts to settle out and those foreclosures become smaller and smaller, we're seeing what the real market could be here.
That's right. And it's interesting because even the reaction to the bubble and trying to solve a lot of those problems, we had a tightening of credit, so that even creates an influence on the market today. So hopefully as maybe credit is loosened up a little bit, we'll see even more activity.
Well, I think too in Hampton is such a military area. All of Hampton Roads is. And we are particularly hamstrung when people who were in the military used to be able to buy and sell houses when they were stationed somewhere for a long period of time. And a lot of our folks have a house someplace else that they can't reasonably sell. And so it affects the market here and it affects sales here when they get here.
It does. And that's something very important. What happens in the real estate market in Hampton is affected by so many other influences that are many times beyond our control, just as you say with that situation.
Well, okay, since we're talking about things that affect the real estate market, you make a real point that jobs, the economy and jobs are the biggest factor.
Right. Employment is a primary driver of real estate. So we often look to see the employment figures for the Hampton Roads region, and that really is the place you want to look because that's what's driving. Someone that lives in Hampton may work in Chesapeake, may work in
a lot of people are at the
James
Navy
City.
base or somewhere
Right.
else, or they live in between where two people in the couple work.
That's right. So the region is the appropriate place to look for the employment statistics. And
so we're looking at that graph on the screen now, and you can see where it went up and where it came down.
We peaked back in 2006. And then what's interesting is that the real estate market lags the employment numbers by about 16 to 18 months. And we very much saw that the peak of our real estate market was 2008, the end of 2008. And then what you also need to consider is that the real estate appraisers in the city's assessor's office are working and looking at sales in the year past. So that means that the assessments are going to end up lagging with a combination of those two factors, 2 to 3 years. Mm-hmm. So, and that's precisely when we had the highest assessments was 2010. So when you follow the employment figures on the chart, you'll notice they've been rising, and so have the assessments. And we've now crept back up to $14.2 billion for the total land book, and we're approaching back where the height was at 15.1, just as employment is creeping back.
And as you notice, though, the upside where we went up in that 2000 to 2008 range was a much steeper curve. And what we're seeing now is a very slow, on both the job side and the housing and commercial side, is a very slow growth.
Very gradual.
What the economists call a fitful recovery. Right. So that's pretty much the same in the commercial market as well.
It is.
The other thing I wanted to talk about now, the timetable at which you guys do this, as you noted, is a little bit confusing. So the numbers you're releasing now are as of January 1st of 2017.
Right.
And it's the reassessments that tax bills beginning in the tax year, beginning in July, will be based on. But there's a lot of time between now and July. So what happens if things change, or what do you do between the preliminary land book that you announced and the final land book, July 1?
The valuations are all set as of July 1. So what the only thing that we will add to the land book after January 1 are additions of new construction and renovations. And those are put on at the rates that we used back on those January 1 valuations. And typically, it is not a large addition. Over the past 5 years, on average, we've increased those initial numbers of the land book by 0.2%. So it's not a major change typically by the time.
But it could help, and I know I'm a little bit of an optimist, but you also noted more signs of new construction right now than there were a year ago or 2 years ago.
That's right. At the end of, during our council presentation, we always provide some of the projects that are being completed in the next 6 months or the next year. And this year it was very easy to find some examples, and they're big examples this year. And we talked about the mini storage that's being constructed in front of Walmart.
The one in front of Walmart, and then the e-commerce center on Todd's Lane in Aberdeen.
Right, and we have a number of grocery stores, the Lidl already under construction, the Aldi hopefully beginning very soon.
And the Kroger and the renovations at River Point.
That's right.
Well, let's also talk about that because, you know, you want more of your growth to come from new construction, new houses, new residents, new taxpayers, new businesses, than you do from the kind of inflation or growth investment factor in our homes. How does it look so far this year? What of your increase, almost half, not quite, did come from new additions to our land book?
That's right. 41% did come from new. I'm sorry, 41% came from appreciation.
Okay.
And the 60%, 59% came from new construction.
And that is a really good number, especially in a city that's so built out. I mean, one of the things as a city or a county especially is new and growing. There's a big growth factor every year in the land book without affecting individual homeowners or their taxes because you have new people coming online constantly.
Right.
And when you're out of land, or mostly out of land, that's much harder to do.
It's a little more challenging to grow the land book in the same way because we're essentially having to eliminate something before we get that net addition.
And, okay, so you also talked about then between the preliminary and the final land book, in most years, that number goes up a little bit
Right.
because you have stuff coming online. But in some years, you have, when you have redevelopment, you have stuff coming offline.
That's right.
Before you can get that addition back onto the tax rolls.
That's right.
So it's a fitful process, as you say. But we're going in the right direction.
That's right.
Now, the other thing that happens between now and July is that there is an appeals process. If you don't like your assessment or don't think it, not if you don't like it, but if you have grounds to think it's not accurate, what should people do, Brian?
The appeal period begins January 28th when we send out our notices of those properties that did change. And that's important to remember that you may not get a notice, but if you have a concern, you can still call in during this appeal period. We only send the notices if your assessment has changed.
But if people are curious, and they didn't get a card, maybe they didn't save last year's or don't remember what their value is, you can go online to hampton.gov/GIS and look up all kinds of information. You can look at your assessment for the past 5 years. You can look at your tax bill. You can look at what day your trash gets picked up. I mean, what your neighborhood district is. There's all kinds of information in there.
Right, right. Additionally, you know, if you look at that information related to your house, to your business property, and you see something that's of a concern, please give us a call. And also recommend going to hampton.gov/assessor, and that will give you information about the assessment process and about the appeal process as well, because the appeal process really has two parts. We call it the office review, And that's where you can come and talk to us, and you'll be able to speak with the appraiser that assessed your property, and ask questions. If you have a concern, you think maybe some of the information might be inaccurate, we can look at that and correct it if necessary.
And that's easier than having to fill out a form and go through the formal process. So it's
is.
nice that you guys provide that interim step.
So please don't neglect to do that, because we encourage folks to give us a call or come in and visit us as well.
Okay, well, Brian, is there anything I have forgotten to ask that you want to mention before we wrap up?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Good news, though.
Good news, and we needed some good news, didn't we?
Yes.
That's great. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you do understand that we are moving forward. We're seeing growth, and we're seeing that stabilization and slight increase in the things many of us have invested our nest egg in, and that is great news for Hampton.